So one of the things we want to go ahead in here is to make sure that if we have an empty database, that it still will work the page, and even if there's no treats at all in the application. So let's go ahead and add an end-if in here and just add in this on a new line, like that. And then outside of that, we want to go ahead and make sure, obviously, we check it on the chunks here, that if array, or we can say if it's empty, for example, or we could even just go ahead and say, in this case, where chunks is equal to is empty, for example. Actually, we need to make sure we don't call this an array. So if we go ahead and just say count instead, it is greater than 0. That will go ahead and fix the issue. So if you go and say hi now, it will say property trees is not found. That's because we need to change it from an array here. So let's go ahead and work on that. Alright, so the way we want to proceed now, there's essentially two approaches. So for this to work, we will have to essentially go ahead now and ensure that we chunk through it, but we also use a collection. So this is the approach we could take, which is very hard to manipulate the data inside it. So while this approach works, I think we should go ahead in this case and delete these chunk files here we created. So these chunk files that we have created in here inside Livewire, let's head into components, timeline chunk. In here, let's go ahead and make sure that we now just have the timeline component. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close that down now. So we're going to make a few changes again, but we want to just go ahead and create a collection here, and we're going to call it tweets instead. And we're just going to set it like that. We still need the pages, we still need the chunk size, and we still need an array of chunks. So in this case, when we mount, we want to just create a function here to load more. So for now, let's go ahead and close that, and then just create a public function, load initial chunks. This is gonna go in here then, and we want to essentially get all tweet IDs. And then in here, we want to say what tweet null parent ID, so we don't want to get comments essentially. Latest plug the ID. Then we want to go ahead and say this chunks equals, in this case, all tweets IDs chunk this chunk size. And we want to then say to array. Then we want to go ahead and say if empty this chunks. In that case, we want to go ahead and say this treats we just want to set it to, in this case, where we have in the chunks here. So let's go ahead and set those there. And otherwise, we just want to go ahead and say this treats equal to collect. We just want to say this load initial chunks. This can be a private function because that doesn't need to be accessed outside the class, nor do we need to access inside the timeline component. For it has more pages, we can leave it as it is. For load more, however, we need to modify that around a bit. So we want to say this page plus plus next chunk IDs equals to this chunk. In this case, you want to say array this page -1 more tweets. In this case, it's going to be set like this. And then for adding more tweets, which is the first one we're going to go ahead and fixing now, we just want to go ahead and work very similar to what we've done before. So we want to go ahead and say this treat find it, if treat exists, prepend it, array on shift this chunk's treat ID, and then we want to recalculate the pagination as well. So that function we can just put down at the bottom. We want to just have this here. We have all treat IDs, this chunks, this page, minimum, and that's it essentially. So that's all we need in this component here. However, inside our timeline component, we need to revamp that a bit. So we want to go ahead and make sure we have it looking something along this. So we still load more. We still put the treat ID in here. So let's go ahead and load. Say hello. It shows up. Let's go and scroll down. We load more and more treats until there's nothing left. And if we then go ahead and like it, it still works. If you like the line as well, it still seems to work. Let's go ahead and see what happens if we retreat, and it shows up as a retreat. So this is already working now here, and again we can do the retreat as well, and that seems to work fine. So we only have to make now a few adjustments in this case inside our timeline components. So for example, when we want to go ahead in this case and listen for deleted tweets, we may have to go ahead and change it around later on. But essentially that's everything we need to be able to have infinite scroll. And if we go ahead, reload the page, open up inspect element, let's put it down here. Let's open the network tab. And it seems like it's loading it quite a lot. So we want to look at performance optimizing this later on. But for now, I think we will leave it at this. This is not the best way for doing it performance-wise, but the key thing is that we now do have infinite scroll, and I want to test this out with a bit larger data set. So we have 54 tweets. Let's go ahead and add 300. Let's see what happens if we try to load 300. And so far it still seems to work fine. I can still scroll all the way up to the top here. And again, yeah, we have some performance improvements we can make, but at the end of the day, I think this is a great example of how we can get it to work with updating the timeline as well at the same time without essentially making it completely inconvenient for the user as well. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching it. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.